Today I want to rank the stories of Doctor Who Season 13, now that I've talked pretty extensively on this season both in individual reviews and in my overview. This video will largely serve as the final note of that discussion. Really quick before we get started, this ranking is entirely my opinion and won't necessarily align with your own as it is very subjective. My thoughts in this video are not comprehensive reviews, though if you do want to know what I think more specifically about any given story, you can check out my review for that serial. And with all that established, let's get started in this ranking of Doctor Who Season 13. Planet of Evil may be at the bottom of this list, but I want to be very clear in stating that this is a really solid and entertaining story. The atmosphere that is given throughout this thing, particularly within the first half, really contributes to a quite unique and different style, which I found myself very fond of. This alien forest is one of the absolute best sets that has ever been made for the show, and it really added to that quite specific style of this one. Beyond that, I did find the actual serial to be legitimately engaging, and while the supporting cast on the whole doesn't add that much, the character of Sorensen is used rather interestingly and helps to bring in one of the darker elements later in the story. In terms of what holds this one back, there's very little. Some scenes in the second half definitely don't hold the atmosphere of the earlier parts of the story, and perhaps the villain could have been stronger, but those aren't a big deal at the end of the day, and as simple as the half-invisible creature of this one was, I found it to be effective enough for what the story was trying to do.
Let's go back to the TARDIS and fetch my spectromixer, and I'll fix our position by that star. And I'll repair this power cell and try and make contact.
Well, you can get on with that now. I'll fetch a spectromixer.
Good idea. Would you do that?
Why not? I know the way.
Good thinking. What are you waiting for?
The key.
The android invasion sits just a hair above the previous entry on this list because of two main reasons. The first of which is that the first part of this serial really captures this bizarre eeriness so well, as the Doctor and Sarah Jane find themselves exploring a seemingly empty town and encountering strange individuals. It's a great way to start a story off, and while they don't maintain that tone throughout this whole thing, you then move from there into the rest of this one, which is just a ton of fun. It's hard to imagine watching this thing and not having a blast, because the story does just keep throwing new things at you and doesn't ever let you sit for too long in a situation or location. It fails to let you get bored just by constantly moving around just the right amount. That's not to say there's no time to sit down and catch your breath, there is plenty of time for that, but you can tell that they knew what they were doing in pacing this serial out. I won't discuss the villain too much here, but there is one, and while his motivations are understandable, and you can rationalize what he's doing and why, the actual character just never fully works. It's hard to tell exactly the reason for that, but I think it's because the performance never feels particularly grounded. The villain is perhaps just a little bit too difficult to take seriously, at least for my tastes.
Hang on. I thought I saw someone.
Let's hope they're not strangers here themselves.
Hello there!
Oh, wait, Doctor. I don't like the look of them.
What? Please excuse me. Could you be very kind and tell us where we are?
Terror of the Zygons kicked off Season 13 with a bang, introducing the audience to what would eventually become one of the show's best-known villains, which is a particularly strong statement given that they only had this one-off appearance until 38 years later. This is a unit story with the Fourth Doctor, but unlike the previous attempt in Robot, this one really fits within this fresh new era of the show, which is understandable given that this is actually produced under Philip Hinchcliffe, and the aesthetic of the forest, the small town, the beaches, the large buildings, all contribute to this one having its own distinctive flavor. But even more than that, the Zygons themselves help to add an uncertainty and a creepiness that provides for not just a really entertaining story, but some genuinely great moments of horror as well. They do things that utilize the unique characteristics of these creatures within this serial, which helps both in the tone that they are trying to capture, as well as in making this one distinctive and unique when compared with other stories. There's one or two things I could nitpick about this serial, but they are far outweighed by the significant amount of things that really work throughout here.
What worries me is how they, whoever they are, whatever they are, knew we had it.
Meaning?
Meaning, I think we're being watched.
Yes. You know, Brigadier, it does seem as if they know our moves in advance.
A spy? You're not suggesting that one of us is really one of them?
Why not? It's possible.
The Brain of Morbius is probably the most familiar story out of any of the ones in this season, given how much it borrows from Frankenstein's monster. Other stories have taken elements that were previously used in other works, and this one does so to a significant degree, and fortunately it uses all of those things quite well. Somebody in this story is trying to get ahead, but the reason why is flipped around into something new. And what stands out to me in this serial is how engaging it manages to make things that do strike you as quite familiar. It just manages to make them work. The setting and the atmosphere, as I've stated before in this season, is very strong, and I really liked that as a starting place for this story. This one gives you just the right balance of different elements to prevent you from getting bored, and to pace this story out quite nicely. There's the cult/religious element that you get with the Sisterhood of Karn, which serves as this nice sort of secondary element to the plot, which mixes quite well alongside the horror we got from inside the castle. Also, the villains within this one serve as rather compelling and intriguing foes, and they definitely worked effectively as antagonists for our story.
Let me take your hat, sir. What a magnificent head.
What?
Superb head. Huh. Well, I'm glad you like it. I have had several. I used to have an old grey model before this. Some people liked it.
I did.
What?
Pyramids of Mars is one of those Doctor Who serials that just gets better every time I revisit it. I enjoyed it as a child, and I also enjoyed watching it in my teens, and rewatching it in this most recent time, I found that I just adore this story. At 4 parts long, it doesn't outstay its welcome, and it does a nice job of guiding you through this one as it works towards a fantastic ending. The setting is beautiful. I love this vibrant and gorgeous forest, which can be quite open but also very limiting within those invisible barriers. And for me, probably the biggest standout of this entire thing comes down to the villains and the final part. Sutekh's servant is cold and deliberate, and I love how the body he uses looks so pale. But better still is how menacing and powerful Sutekh actually is, and the way the story showcases that in the final part is fantastic, making for a brilliant conclusion to an already great story. There's puzzles, there's fun dialogue, there's intrigue, there's explosives, and all of the really good drama of the story is just a lovely bonus on top of this one already being really quite fun and entertaining to watch as we follow our leads in dealing with ever-changing circumstances. It's a legitimately fun story that also feels as though it has stakes, which is why I think it stands on its own as being such a fantastic Doctor Who story, and one of the best in the entirety of the classic series.
You will seek out and destroy my enemies. The alien who dares to intrude, the humans, animals, birds, fish, reptiles. All life is my enemy. All life shall perish under the reign of Sutekh the Destroyer.
Only Sutekh shall live.
The Seeds of Doom is not only the best story of this entire season, but a strong contender for the best of the entire classic show's run. It's hard to pinpoint the one specific thing that puts this serial at the top of this list, because it's really everything that makes this one what it is. In spite of being the longest serial of the ranking at 6 parts long, it still manages to be the most engaging and well-paced on the whole. Where Pyramids of Mars was great through the first 3 parts and excellent in its final part, Seeds of Doom is more consistent in its quality, with every single part of this one being really great and enjoyable to watch. The first 2 parts set in Antarctica are really fantastic, claustrophobic, and eerie television with some very solid horror involving the Crinoid. And they did such a great job of laying the groundwork for what the rest of the story would do, so that the audience could understand the danger and the stakes could be raised. The Crinoid is a really strong villain. A plant that eats people is just a great idea for a story, and that is balanced so well by the kind of insane pro-plants' rights caricature of an environmentalist that is Harrison Chase. And he is really good in this one, balancing his role so well, not veering too far into a performance that is over the top, and always being grounded enough to be a genuinely threatening and compelling presence. The music is really strong and adds so much in creating this atmosphere. I love the autumn setting and the look of that in the second section of this story. The creepy elements of horror in here are fantastic, and I appreciate how seriously the material is taken, while still just being compelling television that isn't overly morbid or grim. And on top of all of those things I've just said, the Doctor and Sarah Jane shine as bright as ever, as they have done throughout this entire serial, proving themselves to be genuinely the best duo to ever lead the show. I adore their chemistry, their presence, and just have an absolute blast following them around for a serial. They added a lot in terms of making this entire season what it was, and that was 100% true for this one as well.
There's been an accident. One of the men was infected.
By the pod?
He went mad.
Yes, you could say he's not quite himself.
Where is he now?
We don't know. Somewhere out there.
Oh, you mean you have a homicidal maniac on the loose?
Oh, much more dangerous than that, and he's desperate for food and warmth. But there's only one place he can find food and warmth.
You mean this camp?
It's a comforting thought, isn't it? I think we should lock all the doors and windows.
And that does it for this ranking of Doctor Who Season 13. Feel free to leave yours down below if you so wish. Your list will likely not align fully with mine, which is 100% okay, so long as we both know that this is all in good fun. I had the most delightful time making my way through this season, and I hope you did too. I promise you that I will be moving on to Season 14 of the show, and if you'd like to get a better idea as to how that is going to happen and what that's going to look like, you can check out my update video, which should be out already. But if you can't spare the 5 minutes, just know that 6 more reviews are coming for each of these respective serials, and I'm planning to make them weekly again, but it might take a little time to actually finish them up and release them. That's the extremely condensed version. I explain it far better in the video. And having said all of that, I hope to see you around at some point in the future for the return of these classic reviews with the Mask of Mandragora, or possibly with some Series 13 reviews. But if not, that is totally fine, so long as you know that I appreciate your time here today. And with all of that said, thank you very much for watching, take care, and have a lovely week.